welcome to Dog Talk. I'm Laura McKillop.
And I'm Dan Camilleri, and we'd like to start by thanking Enduro for supporting and bringing you our live weekly Q&A. This week we are pre-recording and fortunate enough to be speaking to Sanne Pedersen from the Working German Shepherd Dog Sports Club of Australasia.
Thank you very much, guys.
How's it going? How's your day?
Very good indeed. Yeah, it's been good. Just came home from dog training.
Dog training.
What was a good day then?
What happened to dog training tonight? What were you?
Well, so today I took my dog out doing the tracking with his nose work, and then got back home, had a break, and then we spent an hour on some obedience training on our field in the backyard.
And I know you're from previous conversations. We had a conversation the other day here, and I talked for a few hours. And you're a big believer in if you're going to have a dog and do something, you've got to put the time and effort into it. How often do you track for our people listening back here? How often are you tracking a week?
I try to at least twice. In average, it's 3 times when I prepare up for competitions. I usually fit in 4 times a week.
Wow.
Yeah, well, 4 times a week. That's dedication. And is that running each dog 4 times a week, or running just a particular dog, rotating through them?
No, well, so when I take my dogs out, I have 3 German Shepherds and 2 of them I'm training. So I have my current competition dog, and then I have a youngster coming up. And when I dedicate time to go out and training, they all get a run. My retired dog, not as much, but yeah. So when I go out tracking, it's with my 2 current dogs. I feel very bad leaving them behind, so they all get a chance to get out and get some fresh air.
And are you using the same article like each time during the week?
Pardon?
Are you using the same article to track?
So we roster. I go to a couple of different fields. By articles, you mean the articles we're actually finding on our tracks?
Yeah.
No, I have I've been tracking for 30 years, so I have a big bag now with articles, and trying to not use the same ones every time because they get a certain scent. So they're different articles, different kind of material.
Yeah. What goes into actually setting up that track? So I don't know much about what tracking and what you're sort of doing, but it sounds like 4 times a week at times is obviously a lot of effort to set all that up. Is that correct?
The sport I'm involved in is IGP, which was once upon a time referred to as Schutzhund training. So it has 3 disciplines. We're actually teaching the dogs, and all 3 of them are quite intensive. So we have the sleep work, the obedience, and the tracking. So on top of the 4 times tracking a week, you need to put the other 2 disciplines in as well. But no, I started out plus 30 years in tracking. That's where I started with the Belgian Shepherds back in Denmark. And basically you lay a track, you either walk it yourself or you have a stranger to do it for you. And then depending on the education level of your dog, there are different lengths, and you let them lay for different times. So if we talk competition tracks, they are around 20 minutes old, and they can get up to 2 hours old. And the smallest ones are 200 paces, and the longest ones are 1,200 paces, I think. So when you get into the higher level, it's quite a lot of time, but it's primarily, if we talk tracking, it's primarily sit and wait, looking at your clock, waiting for it to be old enough to walk it. But yeah, I take my computer with me and sit and do some work while I'm waiting. It's easy.
Yeah.
And tracking's like for your sport. We'll get into a bit more of that later, but predominantly for your tracking, you want to do that in the earlier hours of the day?
Many do. I don't. So I have private arrangements where I can basically rock up as it fits into my day. And due to all the other things I also try to fit into my life, that's quite convenient for me that I can basically just go whenever I want. There are a lot of people, especially in Australia, they tend to track very early in the mornings. Especially at summer, it just gets too hot, or you're nervous about the snakes and stuff. So, but yeah, it can be any time during the day. From a competition point of view, I believe it's good to expose the dogs to track at different times of the day. The setting will be different.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And we kind of jump straight into it. Do you want to tell us a bit about yourself? Obviously, you mentioned tracking there 30 years ago with your shepherd back in Denmark.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up with animals and had anything from rabbits to turtles to birds. That went into dogs. I actually did 10 years of competition riding, show jumping with horses in my teens. And then when I moved out from home to start at uni, Dad rocked up with a Belgian Shepherd, being nervous of me being, relatively young. And from there, I spotted somebody walking around in gumboots on a field next to where I lived. Every Saturday they were there. So eventually I was brave enough to ask what they were doing, and that was tracking. And I joined that group and tracked with them. And then some years later in Denmark, the sport is pretty big. So they roster between the clubs when they are hosting the national championship. So the club I was part of hosted the national IDP championship early 90s. And that was the first time I saw the sport in its full galore. And these are some of the best competition people we had in Denmark. And I was hooked. I was absolutely hooked. And it turned into a lifestyle for me. I think, moving out from home at uni, living by myself. For me, my dog training, well, for starters, I have a passion of the communication, the bond you can get with animals. We started probably with my horses. And I still get absolutely surprised about what you can teach an animal if you put the hours into it. And it for me, it's kind of my gym. You asking me, 4 hours going out lying a track. Well, for me, it takes me away from what pays the bills and get me outside and get some fresh air between the ears. So that's how I see my dog training. It's I need it as much as the dogs to get outside.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What does pay the bill then?
As a profession, I have a doctorate degree as a molecular biologist. So I did my uni degree in Denmark and came for a postdoc position in Australia in 2000. And that was for 2 years. Went back to Denmark, lasted probably 4 months, realizing it rains all the time in Denmark, and said, that's it. I'm going back to Australia. And they're the only 2 years where I didn't have a dog. So when I decided to move to Australia, I got myself established and started to look for the dog sport clubs here in Australia. So in 2004, I co-founded Sydney Dog Sport Club, which is still running, and I'm still managing that. So that's coming up to 20 years of age. And became a licensed breeder in 2013, 14. And since 2015, I've been the president of the Working German Shepherd Dog Sport Clubs of Australasia. So that's in brief my background, and here in Australia, my professional career is in biotech industries, private industries, working with various cancer research and developing tests for trying to save people's lives.
That's unreal.
You're a pretty busy woman.
At times, yes.
Yeah.
A job like that, no wonder you need to get out and do something else to take your brain away from those sort of levels of stress, and it'd be a lot to think about constantly, as well as
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, I need this. I go stir crazy as well. I mean, for starters, the dogs love to go out every day, so I'm doing something with them every day, even though maybe it's just a run next to the bike. But we usually have 2 sessions a day doing something. But I need it as much as my dogs.
Your
Right.
pub time.
Pardon?
Your pub time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the going to the pub, you're going to train a dog.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that actually, we'll jump back a bit there because you mentioned IGP doing it all that time ago. What was the purpose of IGP? Like, why was it established that many years ago, and particularly massive overseas before it came to Australia? But what was it intended for?
Well, we have to go, I think, 120 years back. So the sport was originally developed in Germany, specifically for the German Shepherd dogs, where it was established as a test to find the dogs that were best suitable for the next generation. The sport was implemented, I think, roughly 15 years after the first German Shepherd was registered, and there was a recognition of, even though people were in their own little bubble working with their dogs, there were a need for trial and some standardized measures to assess and test dogs to find those that had, the correct temperament, the correct working ethics, loyalty, and a desire to work. And so that was roughly talking 1910 when the sport was first established, and it was a huge success. So while it was started by breeders, and this was breeders that was using the German Shepherds for herding initially, the sport became so popular that basically you started to have civilians starting hobby clubs where people got together and all sharing a passion for working with dogs and experience that bond you can have between the animals. And from there on, it basically spread across Europe, especially North Europe. And in the 1980s, I think they founded the World Union for the German Shepherds, and at this point of time, the German Shepherd was one of the top 5 breeds in the world. But basically, the sport is what established the modern day German Shepherd breed as we know it today. Right? You don't need to go many generations back, and you can see it is in their whole pedigree tree. Society have changed a bit with the way they see pedigree, certain pure breeds dogs, so there's a bit more relaxed view on what needs to be tested for, but the sport is still the biggest dog sport in the world.
It's massive, isn't it? Like, I don't think here in Australia we actually understand just how big it is.
No, I mean, if you take so the working German Shepherd, well, the WGSDCA has 14 clubs now across Australia. If we take Denmark in comparison, they have 450 IGP dog sport clubs, and Denmark is smaller than Tasmania.
Wow. Holy crap, that is unreal. And we have 14.
We split a bit. Australia has its own history, right? I'm just talking within our fraternity. There are more clubs out there, and there are different dog sports as well. But if we just talk IGP, it's huge in Europe, and US as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're talking about the Shepherd a bit tonight, but originally you said you had a Belgian Shepherd. Where did the flip happen?
Well, so the Belgian Shepherd was because that was what Daddy bought me. So that's how I ended up with that one. And she was a really good tracker. and that was about it. And then when I went, I saw this national championship back in the 90s. That was for German Shepherd specifically, to get some contacts, and that's why I did the shift. And I never ever looked back. With that said, though, when I came back to live in Australia, my first dog here was a Cane Corso, because I couldn't find any of the German Shepherds I was after.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
He turned out to be bigger than me, so.
I was gonna say, a bit different. And
Yeah.
what was that? You said you couldn't find one that you were after. You were after a specific type.
No, it's more. I mean, because, I don't know much you want to go into the details, but the sport has a stigma around it here in Australia. So a lot of the dog sport in Australia, whether we talk IGP or some of the other ones that involve sleeve work, they're a bit isolated in it, right? Because of some of the pushback we're getting. So I struggled to figure out where the clubs were and the breeders and all of that. And then I can't even remember why I chose a Cane Corso. I like these type of breeds as well. And I thought, let's try that. 18 months later, I had to realize he was he was a lovely dog, though, very, very lovely. He ended up in the New South Wales Police as a crowd control dog. But yeah, he was too big for me.
Yeah.
That's cool in itself, though, that you've gotten a dog, that obviously was too big for you or might not have worked out, but he's gone on to do something that, that's such an unreal job as well for a dog, and to get it to that level is pretty cool.
Yeah. No, Sika was a beautiful boy.
Actually, you might be able to help out with this. Like, with so many restrictions in Victoria around bite work, does IGP exist in Victoria, or Victorians come up go into state to compete? What happens there?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of people, if we just want to talk the IGP dog sport, as I said, there's 3 disciplines, right? And it's governed by the FCI utility dog rule book, which is 160 pages. Says a newly licensed judge. And I mean, I counted them the other day. There's 28 titles in there, right? And 65% of those titles do not have the sleeve work in it. So the sport can be undertaken in Victoria. There are some conditions. If they are met, you can do the sleeve work as well. But it's a complicated setting in Victoria, but there are clubs down there, and some of them focus, really on tracking. We often see now, as our clubs grow a bit, that they tend to be collared a bit what people really like. So there can be some clubs that's really focused on the tracking. There can be some clubs that's really focusing on the obedience work. And in our organization, we don't allow just the sleeve work. There's quite an emphasis on that sleeve work is part of a 3-discipline title. So all the other 2 needs to be part of it as well. And there's some elements that in the obedience part that you need to carry into the sleeve work to get it all to glue together.
Yeah. So you just made a comment that you're a newly licensed judge. So even after your 30 plus years, you've only just become a judge?
Because I don't really want to be it. But yeah, so I got the license February or January last year, I think it was. And there's an element of, when I started, you need a lot of volunteer people in any of these organizations that invest a lot of heart and time. And help newbies, and we don't have that many judges in Australia, and so we run our judges license program in concordance with the international rules. So that really means you need to have trained a certain numbers of dogs to a certain level, and participated in some national championship and all of that. So that's not easy. It doesn't come along easy, right? It takes time to get to that level. And because I'm a president of the organization,
It's that prerequisite, right?
it's a lot of time, right? But no, I thought, it's at least that's one way of giving back. And it helps. Our jobs portfolio is definitely growing in Australia now. And yeah.
I remember when we had a chat with Pat Stewart, and he said similar, right? Like they were looking for decoys, and they realised, well, if they wanted to judge something, there was only 3 people that they could use as a decoy, and 3 mates. So that means that 2 of them couldn't go, so they have to start training their own.
Yeah.
So you guys are limited at the moment as well. And I've been fortunate enough to be to an IGP or 2, and see that most of the judges are international guests, all right?
Yeah, it depends. I mean, at our nationals or any of the nationals now, I think in Australia, Australia have come a long way in the 22, 23 years I've been here when we talk these kind of dog sports. But if we talk to various organizations, most of them will have international judges down for the higher level competitions, so the various national championships. And I think that's also one of the elements that plays in there. It's about, having fair, even playground for everybody involved. You get a judge down that's never ever seen the dogs. There's no relationships, so it just really makes it, open and fair for everybody involved. And then for the various club trials, the clubs tend to use local judges, so to speak.
Yeah. So what makes you say that Australia's come so far in the sport in the last 23 years?
Well, I think because of the stigma and all of that, which really started in the 90s, that was a bit of a setback. And then in the 90s, the various clubs basically, because of the mainstream canine position on these sports, we had to sit independently. So the establishment of organizations, get the clubs to work together, all of that takes time to put an infrastructure in place, getting procedures and rules and regulations. How are you doing the admin governance and all of these things that needs to be in place? That takes time. And that was in the beginnings when I first came here to Australia, where the clubs are really established now. When we have competitions, the nationals are on specified dates, and there weren't many clubs. And I think, well, in the time I've been president, I think we doubled our number of clubs, or tripled it, almost doubled it at least. And I think social media come around, just promotion of the sport. There's a lot of elements that's played into why we're growing and why it has moved so far. And I think, people are just more willing, to travel and help each other. But Australia is difficult because it's such a big country, right? It's not like in Denmark, I drive 30 kilometers and I go, ooh, look at that.
Yeah.
That's another club. I can train a bit. Here I have to drive 800 kilometers.
Yes. It's very much like that.
So what makes a good IGP dog?
It's a very open-ended question, because I think it depends really what your aspiration is as a handler as well. I mean, I think I was 5 dogs in before I even got an IGP title. I don't recall those 5 dogs as being bad IGP. It was just competition sporting dogs. It's an element of me learning. So what's the point I'm trying to make here? You can have a dog that's extremely keen on pleasing, that can be very helpful from a newbie or inexperienced person. And then, you know, as you get more and more experience and aspirations, and you get really familiar with how the various exercises needs to be shown, and how to train the precision, the type of dog changes a bit. For me, I like a dog that's very drivey, just goes all the time, but it also needs to have an off button. I am a big believer in my dogs are part of the family. They live inside. When we don't train, I have one lying here now. They're part of the family. So they've got to be an off button, where they're just a normal, almost pet dog, right?
Aren't these dogs big man killers that can't be around people because they're dangerous?
No, not really. Not really. They are, when at home, they are as much as a pet family, you know, dog as any other dog, that they're just extremely well behaved. I have kids as well. So, you know, so for me, it's a dog that really understands the difference as to, now we just being a couch potato and snuggling up, and this is nice. And then as soon as I put on certain shoes or a certain jacket, they go, Vroom! We know what that means. And then I need a dog that's, for me, I don't need the hardest dog. I need a dog that's what I call is courageous and brave, have a ticker, but really, really adores to do something together.
Yeah.
I mean, that's when the magic happened, right? If you the type of dog I like to work with is a dog that's basically right in my face asking, what are we going to do?
You love something that switch between gears but still wants to be a teammate, right?
Yeah. But people, you know, ask another person, and I'm pretty sure you will get slightly different opinions about what constitutes a good IGP dog. So I think the core elements is no different to what people are looking for in other working dogs. I mean, when I was out chatting with you some days ago, you know, you showed me some of your working dogs, and I can see the core is similar. I mean, it's the same kind of traits we're looking for, in the sense of they want to do something for us to allow them to work and use their abilities. Obviously, if we talk the livestock dogs, they genetically have been selected over decades to have certain skills that you probably no longer will find in a German Shepherd, even though they started out as herding dogs as well. But the core element of wanting to place and do something, I think that's in common across all working dog breeds.
Actually, I was just writing a point there. It's something I know you feel passionate about, and it's criminal not to give a dog a job.
Yes, I can. How long time do we have? I can get very passionate in. I mean, if we talk the German Shepherd dog, as I said, for decades it's been in the top 5 worldwide. It's, you know, its iconic blueprint is, you know, people, when I ask, why did you choose a German Shepherd? Well, it's majestic, it's clever, and it's intelligent. It has presence, it's loyal, it's quite versatile. And then when you go, well, so what are you doing with your dog? Oh, I don't really want to do something with it. And then, you know, often when I have these chat with people, they have dogs that become a nuisance. And I was like, well, they're a nuisance to you because you're not giving them any physical or mental stimulation. Now, I don't have any opinion about what you choose to do with your dog, as long as you do something with the dog. So I'm extremely passionate about don't choose a working dog breed if you don't want to do something with it. And walking it twice a day is not going to be enough.
That's right. And I did take a little jab at you there, little jab earlier where I said, oh, aren't these big, mean, aggressive dogs? But you guys, people think, you know, you talked about stigma, right? These dogs don't want to be there, and it's all yank and crank compulsion training. You guys actually are marked down if it doesn't look like your dogs are having fun.
Yeah, I mean, that's also because the sport have as we started out, it was originally a breed eligibility test, right? And we're talking 100 years ago, where the German Shepherds breed, they went from herding and then they got into the police. And from there, that's why the sleeve work was included. And in Germany, they called it protection work, right? And back then, it may have been an element of protection in it, as we would define it today, but the sport has really evolved into a sport because you have civilians that's really enjoying doing this with their dogs. So the various disciplines we are showing is all in a sporting setting. So there is no training where the dogs are, aggressive. Matter of fact, the rule book have zero tolerance for aggressive dogs. They get disqualified, and the clubs, we don't want to train them because an aggressive dog, a genetically aggressive dog, becomes unpredictable. An unpredictable dog is an unsafe dog. So I think it went from the stigma is a bit by the sport. Initially, it was called protection work or man work, and I understand why people start twitching their eyes a bit. But if you go and to a club or to one of our events, and we actually showed it beautifully at our national that we had in Waka Waka some weeks back, that so what the dogs are actually taught is for them, the sleeve is a reward, right? So we are asking, and it's subtle differences. And when I saw you herding, whatever you guys call that in your world, suddenly they were in front of me, and I don't know what you did because it was very, very subtle. But it's the same in the sleeve work, right? So what people see is a dog that's biting, but really that is the reward for the dog. For the dog, that sleeve is no different to when we play with a ball or your old socks or an old tea towel. There is a reward in it. So in the sport, we have exercises where the dog needs to show obedience and capability to listen and obey commands, even though it's excited. Because we have trained them we start with a ball, right? That then becomes a tuck, that then becomes a sleeve. But for the dog, it's a reward. If you drop that sleeve, the dog will run away back to its handler, tail up whacking and thinking they're a superstar. And that's what people don't see when they go to our competition. We put it on with purpose at this national, but usually people just see, they bite in the sleeve, that's an out, and that's it. So people have this misunderstanding about what the sport actually is.
Absolutely. You've been a big advocate in promoting just that side of it as well. I know to a few big organisations throughout the country, right? You've been a massive advocate for that. So that's hats off to you. And what motivated you for that? Like, because obviously there would have been a bit of pushback.
It's probably the 10 years I did in Denmark first, and when I came here, it was just, when people look into Australia, we know it for, the kelpies and the cattle dogs and the livestock, and Australia is a big dog country. And then when you get here, you go, I don't really see that, right? And because the sport is so big in Denmark, I was just really, really surprised. Now I understand the history as to why we have this stigma in Australia, but I'm a scientist. I argue the facts, and I'm trying to take any opportunity I can to promote our dogs and show our dogs. I have people that believe because I get my dogs to the highest title levels that my dogs live in the kennel, or you can't get close to them. You can. They're part of my family. They will bark as any other strangers that comes into the property, but that has nothing to do with their training. And once they realize people are allowed to be here, they're totally fine. But yeah, no, I take any opportunity that I get to, and you know, the strongest force is really when we have our dogs with us. You know, I did a seminar some years ago where, you know, in a room, and I had my all retired boys, Rixie, running around. You know, I was showing some slides, and you know, with the sleep work, and everybody went, "Ooh, wow, that's, you know, attack dog training." And then when I was done, I said, by the way, that dog has an ITP3 tails, and all of you have just been sitting here for 2 hours trying to get his attention to pat him, because he's the biggest buffet of people, right? And that was a massive message for people. It's a problem because they don't see our dogs, they don't get close to our dogs, and that's what I'm dedicated to try to promote our dogs.
Do you think that misconception has come around because of the general public having them as pets? These working lines that can't, maybe not control them isn't the right word, but they don't have the work for them, and then that causes them to
Better the tools and knowledge to be able to.
Do you think that's a big part of where the misconception of the breed has come from?
Yes and no. I think Australia is special case when it comes to this particular sport and some of the others, for various reasons. You know, it's politics a bit.
Yeah.
And I think
hype, right? Media hype as well.
Yeah, and I think then because it was dropped for a while. I mean, there was a ban on importing German Shepherds from 1929 to 1974, which meant that people couldn't do certain things, right? And I think that created a habit where people was like, well, you know, we've been breeding without these assessment tests. Why we think the dogs are totally fine? Why the need for it? So that's one side of it. The other side, I just think generally worldwide, the pet fraternity, the way people have dogs these days or any animals have changed immensely. I mean, people still want them as companion dogs. I think they still have tremendous value in the society for that, but people are doing so much more than we did 40 years ago, right? So there's a time restraint, and then I think the mentality have changed a bit in that the dog almost being seen as commodity. There's a bit of it's a living thing that needs to be stimulated, and you cannot just put it aside for 22 hours a day, and then when you're ready, take it up. They go nuts in their head. So I think, and that's not just German Shepherd. I think that's just across the lot, that there's a lot of the public out there that have problems. And then I think that the knowledge base, as you say, that they don't have it. And sometimes that can be problematic for a certain size of a dog, right? If they're not, I mean, all dogs were bred for a purpose once upon a time. And if you don't give them a job, they will find something, most likely something you don't like, right? And then suddenly you have problems.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You touched there as well on the German Shepherd being banned. I know we're not getting into a lot of detail. And I know you mentioned it in that YouTube link that you sent through the other day, which is, I love that. That just shows the dedication you have to something you're passionate about. We can actually, anyone that listens back to this, they actually want to see. Can we share that link if anyone requests that later on?
Yeah.
Cool. Just want to touch on that and that ban in there.
So the history of it.
Yeah.
Well, so
I had no idea German Shepherd was banned in Australia until
I know there's not many people. Well, there's probably, I mean, that's 50 years since the ban got lifted. So, you know, that we're 2 generations in and people tend to have short memory.
Yes.
But no, so, I mean, historically, if you want me to go through it, so the first German Shepherd was registered in 1899. By 1904, so 5 years later, the first 4 dogs arrived German Shepherd to Western Australia. The first 4 GSDs arrived to help with herding, because some of the Australian graziers heard that this is a good herding dog. And they became very popular. So the 15, 20 years that follow, they became a popular dog. So then the rumor is, and the truth is probably somewhere in between, is we were also establishing, now I'm in your camp, they were also establishing the cattle dog, the kelpies and some of these is now dominating the Australian agriculture. And rumor is there was a bit of clash in that. So that triggered a propaganda in the 20s where they were basically saying I don't know who they really were, that the German Shepherd was a wolf hybrid dog. So in 1929, the ban to, and I should correct myself, it was illegal to import whole German Shepherds, so they had to be sterilized if you wanted to import them. And that was kept in place until the mid-1970s.
So almost 50 years.
Yep.
Yeah. I had no idea before I watched that video the other day.
And then, it got lifted, and I think the mainstream German Shepherd fraternity, they did a massive job to get that lifted. But I think there's always a bit of, nervous. That's why we have this tension around the sport, because they're nervous about whether when we do the sport, the dogs are saying, as attack dogs, which they're not. But that's really the aftermath of that ban. But with that said, I think, as we have people that's starting to promote the sport and go out in the public or take their dogs with them and show them, there's starting to be a better understanding about it's just a sport in a very regulated and controlled, simulated environment. And but that's where the stigma is coming from. And it's also why some of the dog sports clubs are not so much more, but when I came 20 years ago, they kind of stayed out of the spotlight, right? Because it's just the political settings we have here in Australia. But it's moved a lot. It helps a lot that we have been able to represent Australia overseas at some world championships for some years now. It helped a lot when we really got blessing to invite international performance judges. And coming back to your question, Lauren, it's why the sport has grown as well. It's only from the mid-2000s that we started to get regular permission to use judges, and that's part of getting the international, especially the German judges. We learned that, you kind of think you're a superstar, and then they come and say, not really. It changed a bit. And we took that on board, and here we are. I think that's why several of the organization have grown, because we suddenly got access, to the international experts to come and help us and
put great standards, right?
It's exactly. So
what they're bred for now has obviously changed a lot over the years as well, right? They're not selected for herding anymore. They're selected for sound dogs. And the work's changed, I suppose, right?
Yeah, the job, as I say, has changed, right? But if we look at all pure breed registered dogs, it has changed, right?
Absolutely.
The vast majority of the puppies being produced, they go out as pet dogs, and I think that's how society has changed. I mean, go back to the 1950s, 40s. The dogs were used for something. They had a purpose.
We touched on the cattle dog there earlier, right? Like, that's changed now. They're more of a guardy house dog than.
I know. It's almost especially for some breeds, let's call them the working dog breeds, they almost split into two now, that you have dogs that's developing into the pet companion dogs where, you know, the breeders might claim, I tone down these iconic drives, and then you have the other gang that's breeding to try to preserve these traits. I mean, in your industry as well, there's a need for dogs having these traits, and it's the same with the German Shepherds. Sure, pick a number, 90+% goes out to pet homes, but the remaining 10, or call it 5, are still playing very critical roles in various service canine organization. And a part of that gene pool that they pick from comes from the dog sport world.
Are you concerned with where the German Shepherd is heading into the future? Like, we're talking about the working dogs here, and you just worked off those percentages. And I suppose we're in a position here where we get a lot of Shepherds come through, and we see some cracky working dogs, but we see some that can barely walk. Like,
Yeah, it's
yours, like being like an advocate for the German Shepherd.
Yeah, there is a concern. I think if you watch that YouTube video, you can see the godfather of the German Shepherd already in 1929 recognized and wrote in his book that, you know, when people started just to focus on the exterior beauty and that, you ruin what's supposed to be in between the ears potentially if you don't test for it. I think worldwide, I mean, it's like anything. Popularity is what ruins it. That's a short version of it, right? Popularity means that you have mass production. Popularity means that, you know, human nature, and this is why we have, 380 different pure breed dogs, is because human likes to, you know, select breeding, and we suddenly have a new type of breed. And I think with the German Shepherds, there's been some confirmation issues, but it's been recognized for a while. And I do think with some of the, let me put my research hat on, with some of the x-rays and diagnostic modalities we now have that you didn't have 30 years ago, that's starting to be a good handle on being able to DNA test for certain genetic traits. You can do X-ray to assess predisposition to hip and elbows and other skeleton malfunction, so to speak. But no, I think it's been problematic, but I do think that overall the world is trying to rectify that matter. I know that German Shepherd with the public, you know, have sometimes a bad label of the banana back or whatever people call them. And it's problematic, but I think you can find it in a lot of breeds, where the breeding hasn't been, it's been too little gene pools, right? And I think that's potentially Australia has been a victim of that. We're so far away from the rest of the world. How do we keep a healthy gene pool for any given dog breed?
100%. And that's what I love about the working dog world or sports, is they're breeding from really sound, healthy dogs still, not what they're looking for, or they're not trying to build some designer style of that breed. They're looking for sound dogs.
Yeah, and I think that's the main difference, right? I mean, if you take, I hate the labels show lines and working lines. Can I just say that? Because for me, the German Shepherd is supposed to be a versatile dog, and you might have some that's more in this end or the other end, but putting those labels on, I cannot stand it. But it's good to refer to, so people know what you're talking about. So take, for example, the working line German Shepherds. I just went to the vet today to get my annual vaccination for one of my dogs. Some person stopped me in their car lot and go, "What's that?" It looks like a German Shepherd. And I go, "Yes, it's a German Shepherd. It's a sable colored, right?" And they go, "Oh, it doesn't have the saddlebag." But I think when we talk the working fraternity, like you guys, we more focus on what's between the ears and sound, mentality, physical soundness and all of that, and less focus on stereotyping the exterior.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I don't know how profound it is with your kelpies and all of that, whether, I mean, the kelpies I've seen have been working lions. They all look
Pretty similar.
Well, they look similar, but again, you can see,
Yes.
I mean, if I go to some of the shows and all of that, I can't distinguish one dog from the other. They all look like very, very identical to me. Whereas I think with the working line dogs, you can, that one is more grey or that one is more red. They it's black. If we talk to German Shepherd, there's a lot more variety because we focus on the inner traits.
Ability.
Inner traits.
Inner traits. Yeah. As while we're talking about traits and success, and that you had some recent success yourself at a trial.
Yes, I entered my Bindi Pinhead, as I call her, at at our annual national championship, and came out on the top, which was
well done.
really unexpected. I mean, up to December last year, I thought I had my male dog for another competition year, but I had to retire him. So, and Bindi always played a bit second violin because they're only 6 months apart. But no, so I entered her and thought this is just, going to be a bit of fun, but I guess I'm still competitive. So there it is. And yeah, so for the first time, actually, Australia will send a team of 2 to represent at the World Championship, which is in Hungary in October. And it's the first time they said actually 2. So I've been lucky enough to have represented Australia at a couple of other World Championships in the past. But this is the first time we actually got permission to send a team. The previous years it's been on a wildcard permission. So this time we're sending a team. And it's also the first time it's 2 dogs that's Australian bred, born, trained, and title. So that is pretty significant for me.
That's very, very honourable to be in.
Very, very cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well done.
Yeah.
And did you breed that dog yourself?
Yeah.
Oh wow. Yeah.
That's even a bigger achievement for yourself, right?
Yeah, and so did Glennis that's coming with me, right? So I had a dream, as they say, when I decided to move to Australia, that at some point of time I wanted to import a Danish line, just sentimental reason, really.
Yeah.
And that finally happened in 2013, where I imported Kita. And Kita, that's when I got my breeder license. And I've done 3 litters on her. And Rixie, that's now retired, he won the championship in 2021 and was entitled to go to the Worlds, but COVID killed that one. And Bindi is from litter number 2, this year's achievement. And then I have 1 litter with Bindi actually during COVID, because I was going mental that we couldn't go out. So I decided to put a litter on her. And that's my youngest one. But yeah, she's my second generation, I guess. And Glennis, that's going to the Worlds as well. Her dog is, she's been a breeder forever. Yeah.
And being in so tune with the breed, someone that wanted to get in dog sports and wanted a German Shepherd, what advice would you give to those particular people looking to purchase their first puppy? Or if you want to get into the sport, do you recommend they start with a puppy and bring up their own pup, or should they look at start a dog somewhere? Because I know there are people that sell dogs that are going, right?
Yeah, I think people who think I'll just buy in a title dog and then smack, I'll go. It's not that easy. It's a living animal. You need the bond. It takes time. I imported 2 dogs And it can take 6 to 12 months before you have the bond. And sure, there could be advantages in buying in trained dogs. There's usually a reason why they're for sale. Uh, uh, and I think if one want to buy a trained and adult dog to think they shortcut, I'm not sure that will actually come true, because you need to go through the same bonding phase to actually get that result. It's not a machine, right? Where you got to have the feel for the dog. You got to have the mutual respect and love for each other, or it won't work. So if that's true, then why not spend a year with a puppy and do it from scratch? I mean, I'm old school. I was taught by my dad, as I said, I've had many animals. It was my responsibility. And for me, it's more about the journey. I mean, it's lovely to get the titles, and I want to do titles on my dogs, right? It's like ticks in the CV, but what really matters for me is more the journey. So I think if people are intrigued about the dog sport and fascinated about it, you start with a puppy, but it's a journey, and it's their journey. You cannot fast track it. I mean, I might be able to train a dog to the first beginner one in a year and a half, 2 years of time, but with my first dogs, it took me 4 years. But that was part of the journey, and I think that's what people are forgetting a bit if they see a lot of YouTubes with the sport. It's about the journey. It's about working with the animals, because if it's not, you won't get out every day, and now you get problems.
Great advice. And how do they get into these dog clubs? How do they, when they get their pup, they do their research, they look for a pup from a reputable breeder. How do they find you guys? How do they find the best way? What's the best way to get into the dog sports?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of the working line breeders. There's also part of the clubs, and what I'm starting to see is that breeders will, do some name dropping or advise them to go and reach out to some clubs. Otherwise, IDP Dog Sport Club, I'm pretty sure if you Google that now these days compared to 20 years ago, you should see several clubs coming up. I mean, the main challenge we actually have in the clubs right now, and I'm putting on my president hat, is so we train on public fields. We have them for limited hours. We have 3 disciplines to train. There's only so many dogs you can go through in 3 hours if you want to cover it all. So our clubs are generally small. We don't do what I call the pet dog line training. It's 101 if they're young dogs, to make sure they get quality time and training and black and white guidance as to what we're trying to teach them. So that's actually our main problem, that the clubs can't carry our popularity. So put my research hat on, I can see another problem coming in the horizon. There starts to be a private market for it, where you have private trainers, right? It's a massive problem now in Europe because the clubs can't carry them. And what kind of rules and regulation do you have if it suddenly sits on their business? It's a big problem in Europe right now, because the clubs can't carry them, because of the sport it's growing. It's exploding in Australia.
Yeah, the explosion in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
So let me know if any of you out there know how to solve that problem.
Have you got a message you'd love to get out into the community?
No, I think well, I had several messages I got across, but I think really the working dogs, same with the livestock dogs. I know the public, even when I talk with the neighbors and that, they are absolutely fascinated about these breeds, take the master dog serious and that, what the dogs can do, and they fall in love with them, and then they do nothing. or they want a dog to have less drive, which then potentially stimulates breeders to take it out of it. So, I mean, if you want a bottom line here is, don't fall in love with a working line breed because you are fascinated by all these blueprint traits if you cannot do what that breed deserves, and that's doing something with it.
That is like that's nailed it on the head. I'm like, where do we go from there? Like that's a fantastic message to get out. Like it really is, And I suppose
it goes across all working dog lines, not just shepherds or kelpies.
Kelpie, the cattle dogs, the border collies, the Doberman, the Rottweilers, and all of that. We're losing the traits which made them popular companion pet dogs in the first place. It is because of these inner traits that they became popular. People's mentality of how to have dogs have changed, and I'm sure you guys, I suspect, are breeders as well. You will have a litter and they differ a bit in drive. Some of them are really awesome for the sport, or say if we want to talk the service dog or the livestock. I don't know how you separate a dog that's good at hurdling ducks. I actually heard about for the first time the other day. Never heard about that before. Cattle's not sheep, right? And then some where you're going, it might not have it, but it's perfect for a companion dog.
Yeah.
Sitting into an active family, right? We all know that within the litter, they're not all the same. But starting to breed where we really want a ton, and it ruins the breed. It ruins the trait that made people fall in love with these breeds in the first place. And that's my message. I'll get down with my soapbox.
Microphone drop. That's perfect.
All right.
Is there somebody that you'd like us to sit down, or like to see us sit down and have a chat with on Dog Talk?
Well, that's a big question. I think it's a bit of coincidence that we have connected. I've been fascinated by the livestock fraternity for quite a while. I would love to get opportunities to talk to people. I mean, I'm absolutely fascinated about how you get your dogs to do what they do on commands. It's like right. And then in our sport we go, right? I mean, we must be missing something here, right? So I would welcome an opportunity to. I mean, I'm absolutely fascinated how it can be that subtle. I'm sure there's some genetic traits and all of it is, but still it's an eyesore for me, because go to one of our trials and you'll hear us yell, "Drop!"
You'll don't worry.
He's a little male dog and he's talking to me while he went, and suddenly the sheep was in front of me and I was like, wow, I'm learned something.
We had a trial this weekend and he'll definitely be louder with that same dog, I can guarantee it.
Yeah, and it's in my backyard more or less, and so I will be there and I will be watching.
That's great. And like if you come past someone in what you do that you think we could benefit from, like we are happy to speak to anyone. So if there's someone that you come through in your travels and you go, I think Dog Talk might be interested in speaking to this person and learning a different perspective, shoot a name through to us anytime.
I will. I mean, there's a lot of, as I said, we have 3 disciplines, right? So there's a lot of volunteers, and then somebody really specialized in the tracking, obedience, or the sleep work might be interested to have a chat with them, or more specific. I mean, I don't really call myself a breeder because I only breed when I want my next dog, but maybe there will be an interest to get them on, or have breeders representing the various working breeds. I mean, you're asking a scientist. I'm full of questions.
And I know how passionate you are about uniting all working dog breeds, or all working dog fraternities. I think you've replied to relate to them as today. So it could be the beginning of something, right?
Yeah, no, it will be lovely if we could find a way to connect, because I think by heart we are connected. We love working with our dogs. It's just maybe I'm just not in the right circles to see the crosswalking in Australia. It is happening more in Denmark, where I know that, I mean, we don't have agriculture with hurting as such, but other industries with the police and the military and the sports, they are way more connected, because the common passion is a working dog and doing something with their dogs. And I would love to try to drive, you know, some relationships in Australia with livestock and you know, the gun dogs. There's a lot of variety. I just think it's time for us to hold hands to, if not protect the breed we love, then at least promote why we need working traits still.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And we're going to start wrapping up, but we're not going to let you go that easy, because Laura's got her signature question of the night.
Would you rather fight one duck the size of a horse or 20 horses the size of ducks, and why?
Sorry, you lost me on horses and ducks. What? Can you repeat, please? I'll pay attention.
One duck the size of a horse or
A
20 horses.
A duck, like a rap duck.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. One duck the size of a horse or 20 horses the size of ducks.
Oh, and what do you want me to do with them?
You're going to take them on. It's a sparring match. You're going to fight them.
Oh, fight them. Oh, 20 horses the size of a duck.
Why is that?
Because I used to work with horses, so I believe I'm better at reading horse language and mannerism than one big motherfucker, pardon my language. It's like a horse. I would have no clue how to read that duck.
Oh, that's gold. You held it in well right till the end.
Yeah.
Yes.
Fantastic. So thank you very much for your time tonight. We really appreciate it. I know this is going to be only the first few conversations that we're going to have over a very long time. I'm looking very forward to them. To everyone listening back tonight, I hope you enjoyed this. Come to us with any recommendations. You can see something out of the box for us. So we're happy to talk anything dog related that can help not just the working dog, livestock dogs, but any working breed. So everyone out there, hope you enjoyed it. And please remember, we learn every day, and the day we stop learning will be a sad one for all of us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Good night.
Good night.